I start by weighing out my reagent into a crucible. So I put the crucible on a top-loading balance, double check the bottle if I have the correct reagent in there, which is disodium hydrogen phosphate, and weigh out 5.2 grams. It doesn't have to be exactly 5.2 grams. But I have to record the weight that I put into the crucible, which is 5.27 grams. So in the reaction, I need to put my crucible onto a triangle, which is sitting on a tripod. I turn on the gas for the Bunsen burner and light the Bunsen burner. I open the air valve to make sure the flame is very hot. It's a blue flame, very concentrated heat. Put this directly under the crucible. To increase the heat even more, I put a block underneath the Bunsen burner to lift up the flame so the top of the flame is directly underneath the crucible. This will speed up the reaction. After about 45 minutes, I take the crucible off and put it onto a tile because it's really hot, and I try to get a sample to test if the reaction is complete. So I get a spatula and notice that the product is one rock hard lump and no more powder. So I have to try to get a little sample, small grain size piece out of there, which proves very difficult. So I put the whole product into a small beaker, and then it's a bit easier to get a small grain. I put that into a test tube to test for completion. Let's add a little bit of water and shake it so the product can dissolve. And then I need to add a drop or two of silver nitrate solution into the test tube. As we can see, we get a white precipitate, which means the reaction is complete. So I can now proceed with my next step, which is recrystallization. So now I'm doing my recrystallization, which is a means to purify the product. First, I need to pulverize the chunky raw product by smashing it with a glass rod. What I want to get is pretty fine powder without any chunks, because they won't dissolve in the hot water that I will be using next. So I use boiling water, try out a small quantity, so about 15 to 20 milliliters. Pour this into my beaker, and then I start to stir vigorously and see if it's enough hot solvent to dissolve my raw product. This has to happen rather quickly, otherwise I will reverse the whole reaction. So it's not completely dissolved. I add a little bit more hot water and keep stirring. And once most of my raw product is dissolved, I will filter this solution through gravity filtration. For this I have set up a fluted filter paper and a glass funnel over a conical flask. So I pour my solution through that. This removes any insoluble impurities. Once the solution has run through the filter, I can set the flask into an ice bath to encourage the formation of crystals. While I'm waiting for the crystals to form, I set up my vacuum filtration. So I use a vacuum flask, which needs to be clamped securely so it doesn't fall over. I use a vacuum hose and attach that to the nozzle on the flask, and the other end I attach to the vacuum outlet, which is the gray tap. Then use a Buchner funnel, which goes on top. There's lots of small holes in the bottom of the funnel. And then I use a filter paper to cover those little holes. The filter paper fits snugly into the funnel. And I check my solution for product. Once I have enough crystals in there, I open the vacuum tap. I wet the filter paper with a few drops of water, and then try to get all my product into a slurry and pour this into the Buchner funnel. Some of my product stays behind in my flask, and I need to try to get that all out to maximize my yield. So I try to scrape it with a spatula. And then I flatten the product in the funnel to make sure it gets sucked dry evenly. To wash my product, I remove the vacuum and pour in about 5 milliliters of ethanol. I need to try to cover all the product evenly, so everything is in contact with the ethanol. And I stir this a little bit and apply the vacuum again. The ethanol removes any soluble impurities and also helps dry the crystals. Once the product is dry, I want to collect it in a vial. To determine the weight of my product, I need to weigh the empty vial first. So I put it on a balance and note the weight, which is 19.64 grams. Make note of this, put the product into the vial and then reweigh this. And note this time the weight is 23.79 grams, which I also write down in my notebook. To calculate the practical yield, I take the 23.79 grams, which was the vial with product, and subtract the 19.64 grams of the empty vial, which gives me 4.15 grams of product. And this is also the practical yield of this experiment.